These are 20 hidden facts about the Cowboys that reveal how a desperate author's 6-week novel became John Wayne's most controversial Western, launched Hollywood careers, and created a musical masterpiece that still plays in concert halls today. Director Mark Rydell and Warner Brothers brought William Dale Jennings' novel to the screen in 1972, and what happened behind the scenes tells a story every bit as compelling as the film itself. Secret civil rights history, Oscar-winning cinematography, a TV series that almost worked, and a concert overture that became a classical music staple all wait in these 20 facts that'll change how you see this landmark Western. Fact number 1. The author wrote it in 6 weeks while broke. William Dale Jennings created the Cowboys during what Warner Brothers promotional materials described as a frenetic burst of creative energy when he was flat broke, completing the entire manuscript in just 6 weeks when desperation pushed him to write faster than he'd ever written before. 6 weeks after Jennings finished writing, the manuscript had sold, which is exactly the kind of speed that pays off when you need money yesterday and can't afford to wait for agents and editors to take their sweet time. Stein and Day published the novel in 1971 as a hardcover running 242 to 243 pages, setting the story in 1877 Wyoming-Montana territory and following an 800-mile cattle drive across brutal terrain. Bantam Books released a movie tie-in paperback in January of 1972 with film artwork plastered across the cover, capitalizing on the movie's release at Radio City Music Hall that same month and turning browsers into buyers. From broke to published to seeing his story on the big screen with John Wayne in less than a year, Jennings experienced one of the fastest turnarounds in Hollywood history for a first-time novelist. That kind of luck doesn't happen often, and it certainly doesn't happen to writers who aren't desperate enough to finish a novel in 6 weeks. Fact number 2. The author co-founded America's first gay rights organization. Born October 21, 1917 in Amarillo, Texas, William Dale Jennings studied dance under Lester Horton before working with Martha Graham, building a foundation in performance that would serve him throughout his life. World War II pulled him into the 256th Searchlight Battalion as a technical sergeant, and he served his country in the Pacific Theater on Guadalcanal and Light from 1942 to 1946, seeing combat that shaped his understanding of violence and survival. After the war, Jennings studied cinema at USC from 1946 to 1948, combining his love of performance with technical filmmaking knowledge that few writers possessed. But here's what makes his story remarkable, and what most people who watched the Cowboys never knew about their entertainment. In 1950, Jennings co-founded the Mattachine Society alongside Harry Hay, creating one of America's first gay civil rights organizations at a time when that took serious courage and could destroy your career, your reputation, and possibly your freedom. 2 years later, in 1952, Jennings became the first openly gay man to contest solicitation charges publicly, and his trial ended with an 11-to-1 jury vote for acquittal on entrapment grounds, setting a precedent that would help others fight back against police harassment. That moment in civil rights history matters more than most people realize, happening in an era when being openly gay could get you arrested, fired, blacklisted, or beaten, and Jennings stood up anyway because someone had to be first. Jennings also wrote The Ronin, a novel based on a Zen myth in 1968, which the Japan Times praised as a thunderbolt, full of lightning and excitement, showing his range as a writer who could tackle everything from Zen philosophy to Western cattle drives with equal skill. May 11, 2000 brought his death in La Mirada, California at age 82, leaving behind a legacy that stretched far beyond cattle drives and cowboys into civil rights history that changed America whether people know his name or not. Fact number 3. The director bought the rights before the book was published. Mark Rydell didn't wait to see if the Cowboys would succeed with readers, and a December 10, 1970 Hollywood Reporter item revealed that Rydell purchased the film rights before the novel was even published, before reviewers had read it, before bookstores had ordered it. That's the kind of gamble that separates visionaries from followers in Hollywood, betting on something before anyone else has read a single page or written a review, trusting your gut when everyone else wants proof. Jennings set the novel in 1877 Wyoming-Montana territory and followed an 800-mile cattle drive, but Rydell shifted the film setting to 1878 Montana with a 400-mile drive to Belfourche, cutting the distance in half and condensing the timeline to make it work for a 2-hour movie. Rydell knew he had something special after reading that manuscript, and he put his money where his instincts told him to go, then brought in screenwriters Irving Ravitch and Harriet Frank Jr. to shape it for the screen. Ravitch and Frank worked as a married screenwriting team who'd previously collaborated with Rydell on The Reivers in 1969, and their credits included Oscar-nominated scripts for HUD in 1963 and Norma Rae in 1979, so these weren't rookie writers learning on the job. Jennings received co-screenplay credit for the adaptation, making sure his vision stayed intact even as they trimmed and shaped it for the screen, cutting scenes and dialogue that worked on the page but would drag on film. Novel-to-film differences tell their own story about what works in different mediums. Anderson's death triggers a revenge sequence in the book that runs much longer and more convoluted than what ended up on screen, and the novel includes a 14-page digression about a bargirl walking naked down a street that obviously wasn't going to make it into a movie aimed at family audiences. Ravitch and Frank softened explicit content involving the boys' sexuality and encounters with prostitutes, making it acceptable for a GP rating while keeping the violence that would spark so much controversy from critics who thought children shouldn't see gunfights. Fact number 4. Robert Carradine made his feature film debut as Slim Honeycutt. Every big star has to start somewhere, and for Robert Carradine, that somewhere came playing Slim Honeycutt in his feature film debut when he was just 11 years old and learning how to act on camera. Hollywood ran in his blood as the son of legendary actor John Carradine, but talent and lineage don't guarantee success in an industry that chews up and spits out second-generation actors all the time, crushing them under the weight of expectations they can never meet. Carradine went on to star in Revenge of the Nerds, The Long Riders, and Django Unchained, building a career that's still going strong decades later and proving he had the talent to back up the family name. But it all started with an 11-year-old boy learning to ride horses under instructor Red Burns for 4 hours a day, 8 weeks before cameras rolled, transforming himself from an actor who couldn't ride into someone who looked like he'd grown up on horseback in Montana. Casting director Bob Morrison built his strategy around mixing two types of young performers, with half being experienced rodeo kids who could actually ride, and the other half being actors who could actually perform, creating a combination that would teach each other the skills they lacked. Morrison's theory worked because rodeo kids showed the actors how to handle horses, how to rope, how to sit in the saddle without bouncing around like city kids, while the actors taught the rodeo kids how to deliver a line, how to hit a mark, how to find emotion in a scene instead of just saying words. And if learning about Robert Carradine's debut surprised you, make sure to hit that subscribe button because we've got 16 more facts that'll do the same thing. Fact number 5. The cinematographer was a 3-time Oscar winner. Born in 1906. Robert L. Surtees brought serious credentials to the Cowboys after already holding 3 Academy Awards by the time he shot this film for Mark Rydell. King Solomon's Mines in 1950, The Bad and the Beautiful in 1952, and Ben-Hur in 1959 had all put Oscar statues on his shelf, and that Ben-Hur win came from one of the most technically challenging films ever made, requiring innovation in camera movement and lighting that pushed the limits of what cinematographers thought possible. 16 Oscar nominations between 1944 and 1978 tell the story of his career better than any biography could, and twice he competed with himself in the same year when he had multiple films nominated in the same category, which shows just how much work he did during Hollywood's golden age. Escape from Fort Bravo in 1953 gave him Western experience before the Cowboys, and his career spanned nearly 100 films before he died in 1985, with contemporary reviews praising his work on the Cowboys as colorful and spectacular, and beautifully shot, which doesn't do justice to what he captured. Surtees shot the Cowboys using the Panavision PSR anamorphic camera system on 35mm negative, creating an aspect ratio of 2.39 to 1 for the 35mm prints and 2.20 to 1 for the 70mm blow-up prints that played in prestige theaters. Technicolor in Hollywood processed the negative and created prints that still look gorgeous today, more than 50 years later, holding up better than most films from that era because Surtees knew how to light for Technicolor's demanding process. What makes this even more interesting is that Surtees' son Bruce followed him into cinematography and shot John Wayne's final film, The Shootist, in 1976, creating a family legacy in Western cinematography. Bruce then went on to photograph numerous Clint Eastwood westerns including The Outlaw Josie Wales and Pale Rider, and the Surtees family literally bookended the Duke's Western legacy across 2 generations, with father shooting one of Wayne's last great westerns, and son shooting his actual final film 4 years later. Fact number 6. Principal photography lasts exactly 3.5 months. April 1st through July 21st, 1971 brought principal photography that covered locations across New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, and California in approximately 3.5 months that tested everyone involved in the production. 28 miles from Santa Fe, the San Cristobal Ranch hosted 3 weeks of shooting in the New Mexico mountains, while the crew also filmed at the BB Ranch, Galistio, and Cook Ranch in New Mexico, before packing up and moving to Colorado's high country for the most challenging sequences. Pagosa Springs, Cannon City near the Arkansas River, Castle Rock, and the Durango area in Colorado provided the mountain scenery that makes the film so visually striking, with those locations sitting at high altitude that made things harder for a 64-year-old star with only one lung who refused to use a double for most of his riding scenes. Arizona provided locations in Sonoita, Elgin, and Empire Ranch when they needed different terrain that Colorado and New Mexico couldn't provide, and Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank handled the interior shots on controlled sound stages where weather and altitude wouldn't interfere. Managing 1,500 head of cattle, 11 young actors, and a 64-year-old star with one lung across multiple states in the mountains required military precision and a crew that knew what they were doing without needing constant supervision. Production designer Philip M. Jeffries and set decorator William Kiernan created the look of an 1878 Montana ranch. Costume designer Anthea Silbert dressed everyone in period-accurate clothing that would survive riding and roping, and second unit director Robert Buzz Henry captured additional footage when Rydell couldn't be everywhere at once directing the main unit. Editor Neil Travis handled the editing process with Robert Swink as supervising editor, and Travis would later win an Oscar for editing Dances with Wolves in 1990, proving his skills on another epic western. Sound work came from Jack Solomon, and sound editor Kay Rose would go on to win an Oscar for The River, showing that this production attracted serious talent at every level, from the top names to the crew members nobody outside Hollywood has ever heard of. Fact number 7. The world premiere happened at Radio City Music Hall. January 13, 1972 brought the Cowboys premiere at Radio City Music Hall in New York City, one of the most prestigious venues in America for a film opening, and a statement from Warner Brothers that they believed in this movie enough to give it the red carpet treatment. Los Angeles got the wide-release expansion on February 6, 1972, and Warner Brothers wanted the world to see it as fast as possible, because they knew controversy sells tickets and critics were already sharpening their knives. International releases came quickly after the domestic opening. West Germany saw it January 27th, Austria on February 3rd, Sweden on February 24th, and Italy on February 26th, all in 1972, spreading across Europe in the first 2 months of release and building momentum. Copyright registration number LP 41649 came through on January 13, 1972, making everything official on opening day and protecting Warner Brothers' investment in case someone tried to steal Jennings' story. Running 134 minutes, which is 2 hours and 14 minutes, Warner Brothers created both 35mm and 70mm blow-up prints to maximize the visual impact of Surtees's cinematography. Select theaters got 4-track stereo prints in 35mm or 6-track stereo in 70mm, while most theaters showed it in mono because upgrading to stereo cost money that theater owners didn't want to spend, but that Technicolor cinematography looked gorgeous no matter what sound system played underneath it. Fact number 8. The film made a profit, but the numbers tell a complex story. $6 million went into producing The Cowboys, confirmed by Variety, Turner Classic Movies, and the AFI catalog, and the domestic theatrical gross hit $7.5 million according to the numbers, making it profitable right out of the gate with a 50% return on investment before international markets even reported their numbers. But here's where it gets interesting, and the numbers start telling a bigger story about how successful this film actually became over time. Variety's all-time film rental champs from January 7, 1976, listed the film with $19.25 million in domestic rentals, which represents the studio's rental share rather than the theatrical gross, and means the actual box office numbers were much higher than that $7.5 million figure suggests. Ranking as approximately the 20th highest grossing film of 1972 put it in company with The Godfather, Deliverance, Jeremiah Johnson, and other classics that defined that year in cinema. Described as ranking among the Duke's highest-grossing westerns ever, The Cowboys held its own against Wayne's entire catalog from Stagecoach in 1939 through The Shootist in 1976, which says something given how many westerns John Wayne made across his career. Warner Brothers had a hit on their hands whether critics liked it or not, and the controversy from Pauline Kael and Vincent Canby probably helped rather than hurt because people wanted to see what all the fuss was about and decide for themselves. Fact number 9. Roger Ebert loved it until the ending. 2.5 stars out of 4 came from Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times, and his review perfectly captured the film's split personality when he wrote about what worked and what didn't in Mark Rydell's Western. It's the ending, really, that spoils the Cowboys. Otherwise, it's a good-to-fine Western, with a nice sly performance by Roscoe Lee Browne as the trail cook, and the usual solid Wayne performance. The scenes along the way of the kids learning to be cowboys are good, warm fun, and it's a shame they had to go for the unlikely, violent, and totally contrived last 30 minutes. Ebert appreciated 90% of the movie but felt the violent revenge finale betrayed everything that came before it, turning a coming-of-age Western about boys learning responsibility into something darker that he couldn't defend to readers who trusted his judgment. Roscoe Lee Browne's performance earned specific praise in Ebert's review, calling it nice and sly, which meant Browne had created a character that transcended the script and brought something special to every scene he appeared in. Fact number 10. Pauline Kael absolutely hated it. Pious muck was how Pauline Kael of The New Yorker described the Cowboys, and she wrote that, "The movie is about how these schoolboys become men through learning the old-fashioned virtues of killing," rejecting the entire premise of the film from opening to closing credits. Her disdain for the film came through in every sentence she wrote, and she used her platform at The New Yorker to make sure readers knew this wasn't just a bad movie but a morally objectionable one that taught dangerous lessons to children. Kael denounced Wayne as an idealized Western father figure and summarized his philosophy as, "There are good men and there are bad men. There are no crossovers or nothing in between," seeing the film's black and white morality as outdated and dangerous in an era when Vietnam had already proven that good guys and bad guys don't exist in real war. She saw the film as celebrating violence and teaching boys that killing makes them men, and she wasn't having any of it when America's boys had already learned too much about killing in Southeast Asian jungles. Vincent Canby of the New York Times agreed with Kael's assessment, calling it so flecked with minor dishonesties that you come to recognize it as a sort of Formica Western, something that amounts to a parody of the real thing, dismissing it as fake and manufactured rather than authentic. Wayne played an almost perfect father figure in Canby's view, but the finale in which the boys slaughter a band of cattle rustlers is simply ridiculous, echoing Ebert's complaint that the ending ruined everything the first 2 acts had built. Time Out's review acknowledged the technical achievements while rejecting the message, noting although the film is well performed and beautifully shot by Robert Surtees, its ideology is highly objectionable, celebrating as it does the turning of the boys into hardened killers, giving credit where due while still refusing to endorse what the film taught. Variety took a softer approach, writing, "The story from a novel by William Dale Jennings is long and episodic, and its gentle treatment makes the length something of a hindrance to maximum enjoyment, suggesting the problem involved pacing rather than morality." Modern aggregate scores show the critical divide continues decades later. Rotten Tomatoes gives it 75 to 80% based on 15 to 16 reviews with an average of 7.00 out of 10, while Metacritic shows 52 out of 100 based on 7 critic reviews, revealing that critics remain split on whether The Cowboys succeeds or fails as cinema, as entertainment, and as moral instruction. Fact number 11. The film won the Bronze Wrangler Award. Presented by the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum at the Western Heritage Awards, the Bronze Wrangler Award for Best Theatrical Motion Picture went to The Cowboys, despite all the critical controversy from coastal critics who didn't understand or appreciate what the film tried to accomplish. Mark Rydell, Tim Zinnemann, Irving Ravitch, Harriet Frank Jr., and William Dale Jennings all received the award, which recognized the film's contribution to Western cinema and its authentic portrayal of frontier life that respected the genre's traditions. No Academy Award nominations came for The Cowboys, and no Golden Globe nominations either, but the Bronze Wrangler Award meant something special to everyone involved in the production. People who understood Western heritage and valued what the film tried to accomplish gave that award, even if coastal critics couldn't see past the violence to appreciate the character development, the cinematography from Robert Surtees, the score from John Williams, and the performances that made it all work together. Fact number 12. André Previn convinced John Williams to create a concert overture. Here's where the story gets beautiful, and it starts with John Williams composing the film's score during recording sessions that took place on November 15th, 16th, 18th, 19th, and December 17th of 1971. Recording at Burbank Studios at the Warner Scoring Stage with a 69-piece orchestra for the largest musical cues, Williams created his largest-scale pre-Star Wars original work, heavily influenced by Aaron Copland's Americana style that defined how orchestral Western music should sound to American ears. Herbert W. Spencer and Alexander Courage handled orchestration duties, with Courage being the man who created the Star Trek theme and knew how to make brass sections sing with power and emotion. Dan Wallen mixed the scoring sessions, Donald Harris edited the music into the film, Kurt Wolf contracted the orchestra and hired those 69 musicians, and Israel Baker served as concertmaster, leading those players through Williams' complex arrangements that demanded precision and feeling in equal measure. Conductor André Previn heard fragments of the score and suggested that a concert overture lay hidden within the film's music, but Williams later recalled how persistent Previn had to be before he finally acted on the suggestion and sat down to create something that could stand alone. Several years slipped by, and each time I saw the indefatigable Previn, he would ask, "Have you made an overture of Cowboys yet?" He kept this up until 1980, when I finally worked out the piece and played it at a Boston Pops concert. January 23, 1980 brought the premiere performance with the Boston Pops conducted by Williams, who had just been named conductor of the orchestra that same month, making his tenure start with a piece from one of his pre-Star Wars scores rather than something from the blockbusters that made him famous. Williams noted that both the orchestra and the audience seemed to enjoy the music to such an extent that it has been part of our repertoire ever since, and he wasn't exaggerating about its staying power or its ability to connect with audiences who'd never seen the film. Remaining a staple of the Boston Pops repertoire decades later, the Cowboys Overture has been performed at venues including Tanglewood, most recently in August of 2023, before an audience of 18,000 people who came to hear Williams' music played live by a full orchestra. 2022 brought the U.S. Marine Band performing the piece conducted by Williams himself, bringing the composer back to conduct a piece he'd written 40 years earlier, and performance time runs approximately 7 to 9 minutes depending on the conductor's tempo and interpretation. This concert hall staple will outlive all of us, played by orchestras around the world long after the film itself has been forgotten by everyone except Western enthusiasts and John Wayne fans, proving that Williams created something that transcended the movie and became art in its own right, that stands alongside Copland's Rodeo and Appalachian Spring. Fact number 13. The soundtrack took 21 years to get an official release. Music fans had to wait decades to own the Cowboys score legally, starting with an unofficial promo pressing that appeared on RC31/Greg Lee Processing in 1973, just a year after the film's release, but distributed in such limited quantities that most collectors never saw it. 1994 finally brought the first official CD release, when Vares Sarabanda released VSD 5540, making fans wait 21 years for a legitimate version they could buy in stores without hunting down bootlegs or paying collector prices for that unofficial pressing. 2018 brought the deluxe edition, also from Vares Sarabanda and limited to 3,000 copies, representing a complete rebuild, remix and remaster by Michael Mattachine that expanded to 36 tracks and included everything Williams recorded for the film. 2022 finally brought the first official vinyl release on gold vinyl in a double gatefold package for the 50th anniversary, giving collectors the format they'd wanted since 1972 when the film first played in theaters. If you bought that unofficial 1973 pressing and held onto it for 50 years, keeping it in good condition with the original packaging intact, you've got yourself a collector's item that's worth something now to Williams completists and soundtrack collectors who need every release. Fact number 14. ABC turned the film into a TV series that lasted 12 episodes. Warner Bros. Developed The Cowboys as an ABC television series that premiered February 6, 1974 and ended May 8, 1974 after 12 episodes, each running 30 minutes on Wednesday nights in a time slot that should have worked for a family western in prime time. 4 actors returned from the film, including A. Martinez as Cimarron, Robert Carradine as Slim, Clay O'Brien as Weedy, though playing a different character than in the film, and Sean Kelly as Jimmy, also a different character from his film role with a different backstory and personality. Diana Douglas, mother of Michael Douglas and ex-wife of Kirk Douglas, played Annie Anderson as the widow running the ranch after her husband's death in the film's storyline. Jim Davis, who'd go on to play Jock Ewing on Dallas and become a household name, played U.S. Marshal Bill Winter as the law enforcement presence who looked after the ranch and the boys. Moses Gunn played Jebediah Neitlinger, replacing Roscoe Lee Browne from the film and bringing his own dignity and gravitas to the role of the educated cook who taught the boys about literature and philosophy. Clint Howard, Ron Howard's younger brother and a child actor who'd worked for decades, played Steve, while Kerry McLean played Homer, and Mitch Brown played Hardy, filling out the roster of young cowboys learning to run a ranch and survive in Montana territory. David Dortort produced the series after creating Bonanza and The High Chaparral, so the pedigree was solid enough to succeed if the network had given it a fair chance instead of sabotaging it before episode 1 aired. Notable guest stars included DeForest Kelley, Star Trek's Bones, appearing as Jack Porter in one episode and bringing his familiar face to Western television. John Carradine, Robert Carradine's real-life father, played Oscar Schmidt and created a family connection on screen that viewers who knew Hollywood lineage appreciated, seeing father and son working together even though they didn't share scenes. Fact number 15. The network destroyed the show by cutting it to 30 minutes. Here's what killed the Cowboys TV series, and it wasn't the quality of the acting, the writing, or the production values that David Dortort and his team delivered week after week. ABC reduced the show from its planned 1-hour format to 30 minutes at the last moment, making it impossible to tell stories effectively with such a large cast that included Annie Anderson, Marshall Winter, Nightlinger, and multiple young cowboys who all needed screen time and character development in half the space the creators planned for and budgeted for. Traditional westerns in 1974 were already an anomaly in an era dominated by cop shows like Kojak and Columbo, medical dramas like Medical Center, and sitcoms like All in the Family, with only Gunsmoke remaining on the air from the classic Western TV era that had defined the 1950s and early 60s with shows like Wagon Train and Rawhide. Low ratings led to cancellation after one season, and you can't help but wonder what might have happened if ABC had let the show run at 1 hour like Dortort intended, instead of chopping it down to fit their new programming strategy that prioritized sitcoms over dramas. Dortort knew how to make successful westerns for television after creating 2 of the most successful western series in TV history that ran for decades and made stars out of their casts, but he couldn't overcome a network decision that crippled the show before episode 1 aired and made it impossible to do justice to the characters or the stories. The Cowboys TV series remains a what might have been in television history, a show that could have extended the franchise and kept these characters alive for years if the network had trusted the format and the producer who'd already proven he could deliver hits. Fact number 16. The film didn't reach home video until 1984. Warner Home Video released The Cowboys on VHS in 1984 with catalog number 11213 in clamshell packaging, making fans wait 12 years after the theatrical release to own it at home and watch it whenever they wanted without waiting for it to show up on television. Re-releases followed in 1987, 1990-91, 1995 and 1997, when it appeared in the Warner Bros. Westerns collection in a slipcase with a 135-minute NTSC runtime that became the standard version most people owned through the VHS era. May 22, 2007 brought the deluxe edition DVD with both anamorphic widescreen at 1.85:1 and full frame at 1.33:1, giving viewers the choice between seeing the full frame or the theatrical widescreen presentation that Rydell and Surtees had composed for. Dolby Digital 5.1 surround in English made the most of the stereo elements that survived from the original sound mix, and the package included special features that treated the film with respect. Audio commentary by director Mark Rydell talked viewers through the entire production from pre-production through release, sharing stories about Wayne, the young actors, the locations, and the challenges they faced. A 29-minute featurette called The Cowboys Together Again, filmed in December 2006, reunited cast members to discuss their memories and what the film meant to them decades later, when they'd all gone on to other careers and other lives. A vintage 9-minute featurette called The Breaking of Boys and the Making of Men from the production era showed behind-the-scenes footage from the actual shoot in 1971, giving viewers a glimpse of John Wayne working with the young actors and the crew managing those 1,500 head of cattle across multiple states. The theatrical trailer and behind-the-scenes photos in the packaging rounded out a release that gave fans what they'd been waiting for since the VHS days. June 5, 2007 brought the Blu-ray simultaneously with HD DVD, running 134 minutes with Dolby Digital 5.1 surround at 640 kbps, and the same special features from the DVD. Critics praised the transfer for bringing out the beauty of Robert Surtees' cinematography, but noted some print blemishes and occasional soft shots that couldn't be fixed without going back to the original negative and doing a complete restoration, which Warner Bros. Hasn't done yet, but should consider for the film's 60th anniversary in 2032. Fact number 17. Mark Rydell opened up about hating John Wayne. A 2006 PBS American Masters interview gave Mark Rydell the chance to tell the truth about his initial feelings toward John Wayne, and he didn't hold back or try to sugarcoat the political differences that made him reject the idea of working with the Duke when Warner Brothers first suggested it. "I didn't want him. I had prejudice against him because of a certain political stance that he had taken in the past," He was a very right-wing conservative, and he was responsible in a major portion for the blacklist of the 50s. That blacklist destroyed careers, ruined lives, drove writers and directors out of Hollywood or out of the country, and represented everything Rydell, as a liberal Jewish kid from the Bronx, despised about Hollywood's collaboration with McCarthyism and the House Un-American Activities Committee. Wayne had helped found the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, which fed names to Huck and destroyed people whose only crime involved joining the wrong political organization in the 1930s. And Rydell knew that history intimately because it had touched people he cared about. But Wayne's persistence changed everything when they met in Mexico while Wayne was shooting Big Jake for another director. He just went crazy, said, "I'll do anything to be in this thing." He convinced me that it would be great to have him in the picture. And that conviction, combined with Wayne calling Rydell sir and showing genuine humility, broke through the director's political objections and made him willing to give Wayne a chance despite everything he believed about the man's politics. Wayne's professionalism on set impressed Rydell more than anything else he'd experienced in his career spanning decades and multiple films. He was fabulous, the first guy on the set every morning, and the last guy to leave at night. This man I had loathed. I had disagreed with every position he'd ever taken, but I learned a lot from him about determination and commitment, seeing Wayne live up to his reputation as a professional who took the work seriously and never let his star status excuse laziness or entitlement. Rydell watched Wayne with the young actors and saw something genuine that cameras couldn't fake or manufacture. He loved being with those kids, and they adored him as well. They climbed on him like a monkey bar at a playground, creating a relationship that went beyond acting and directing into something that felt like family, like Wayne had become a grandfather figure who taught them not just about acting but about professionalism and respect. The score recording sessions gave Rydell another perspective on why he made films in the first place, when nothing else in his life gave him the same satisfaction. "Sometimes I think I make films so I can go to scoring sessions. There's nothing quite so exciting as coming onto a scoring stage with John Williams and 100 musicians, and hearing, for example, the overture to the Cowboys, which to this day I remember as being one of the most exciting moments of my life, revealing that music mattered to him as much as the images, maybe more." Wayne himself told the press that working with the children became the greatest experience of my life, despite decades of making films with directors like John Ford and Howard Hawks, and he admitted no actor in his right mind would try to match the antics of 11 kids on screen, but did it anyway because the story mattered more than his ego or his image as the Duke who never showed weakness. Fact number 18. Roscoe Lee Browne fought back against racist critics. Roscoe Lee Browne delivered one of the film's most memorable performances as Nightlinger the cook, speaking with an educated eloquence that reflected his real-life background as a college-educated man who'd taught literature before becoming an actor and bringing that intelligence to every role. Some critics couldn't handle a black character in a Western speaking proper English without dialect or subservience, and Browne responded to their complaints with perfect dignity that exposed their racism for what it was without losing his composure. Some critics complained that I spoke too well to be believable. When a critic makes that remark, I think if I had said "Yasu boss" to John Wayne, then the critic would have taken a shine to me, calling out the double standard that praised white actors for erudition while criticizing black actors for the same quality and demanding they speak in dialect to satisfy white expectations of how black people should sound. Wayne and Browne shared a love of poetry despite their political differences that couldn't have been more extreme if they'd tried to design them for maximum conflict, quoting favorite verses between takes and finding common ground in literature that transcended politics and ideology. Browne ignored friends who urged him not to work with the conservative Wayne who'd supported the blacklist, and the two refrained from discussing politics during filming, proving that mutual respect and shared artistic interests could bridge even the widest political divides if both people wanted it badly enough. People can work together even when they disagree about everything else, and this production proved it in an era when America was more divided than it had been since the Civil War over Vietnam, civil rights, and the generation gap. Browne and Wayne showed that art matters more than politics when you're trying to make something beautiful together, and that respect doesn't require agreement on anything except the commitment to do good work. Fact number 19. Richard Farnsworth had a small role before his Oscar nominations. Richard Farnsworth played Henry Williams in The Cowboys, a relatively small supporting role that most people don't remember unless they're paying close attention to the cast list and wondering who that familiar face belongs to. But Farnsworth went on to receive Oscar nominations for Best Supporting Actor in Comes a Horseman in 1978 and Best Actor in The Straight Story in 1999, proving that talent eventually gets recognized even when it takes decades to happen. Multiple actors who would go on to bigger things appeared in The Cowboys, and Farnsworth's journey from stuntman to Oscar-nominated leading man stands as one of Hollywood's great late-career success stories that proves timing matters less than talent. 52 years old when he got that first nomination for Comes a Horseman, Farnsworth proved that Hollywood could still recognize a great performance, even when it came from someone who'd spent decades doubling for stars and taking falls that broke bones and scarred skin. Working as a stuntman since the 1930s, Farnsworth doubled for actors in hundreds of westerns before directors started giving him small roles and then bigger ones as they realized he could act as well as fall off horses. The Straight Story nomination at age 79 made him the oldest first-time Best Actor nominee in Oscar history, and his performance as Alvin Straight riding a lawnmower across Iowa to see his dying brother moved audiences who'd never heard of him before and didn't care about his stunt work. Fact number 20. The cast reunited in Belle Fourche for the 40th anniversary. Most people know about the 50th anniversary reunion in Fort Worth in June of 2022, when 9 surviving cast members gathered at the John Wayne, an American Experience Museum, and the Cowboy Channel, partnered with the event to celebrate 50 years since the film's release. But 5 years earlier, in 2012, 5 cast members reunited in Belle Fourche, South Dakota during the town's Crazy Days festival for the 40th anniversary, and the location choice mattered more than most people realized when they saw the photos. Belle Fourche served as the destination mentioned in the film, the endpoint of that 400-mile cattle drive from Montana, making it the logical place to celebrate 40 years since they'd played characters trying to reach that same town with their herd. Stephen Hudis, Nicola Bovey, Alfred Barker Jr., Mike Kelly, and Steve Benedict Austin all showed up to celebrate in the actual town where their characters were supposed to deliver those cattle, connecting fiction to reality in a way that honored the film and the fans who'd kept it alive. That's dedication to the film and to the fans who never forgot it, showing up 40 years later in the right place to mark an anniversary that mattered to people who'd grown up watching the Cowboys on television, VHS, DVD and Blu-ray, across 5 decades of home video formats. These actors understood that the film meant something to people beyond just entertainment, that it had become part of their lives and their memories of childhood or young adulthood, and that showing up in Belle Fourche honored both the story and the audience who'd kept it alive through word of mouth and recommendations. William Dale Jennings wrote The Cowboys in 6 weeks while broke and never knew his desperate gamble would create a film that launched careers, won awards, sparked heated critical debates, and inspired a concert overture that still plays in symphony halls today. Radio City Music Hall in 1972 to Belle Fourche in 2012 to Fort Worth in 2022 marks the journey of a film that endured because it dared to show John Wayne die, to turn children into fighters, and to ask hard questions about violence, manhood, and survival that we're still arguing about decades later. Critics who hated it saw boys learning to kill, while critics who loved it saw boys learning to survive, and both were right because the film contains both truths without apologizing for either or pretending that frontier life allowed for easy moral choices. Mark Rydell said it best when he talked about scoring sessions with John Williams, claiming, "Sometimes I think I make films so I can go to scoring sessions." But he made the Cowboys for more than the music, creating a story that would matter, that would last, that would challenge audiences, and that would give us something to talk about for decades after the cameras stopped rolling and the cast went home to their regular lives. From broke to published, to seeing John Wayne bring his characters to life in less than a year, Jennings experienced the kind of luck that doesn't happen often in Hollywood. Robert Surtees won 3 Oscars, and his son shot Wayne's final film, creating a family legacy in Western cinematography. John Williams created a concert piece that outlived the movie and became a classical music staple. Martinez, Robert Carradine, and the other young actors launched careers that continue today, proving that The Cowboys was more than just another Western. Warner Brothers made money, the film won awards, and sparked debates that haven't ended, and nobody forgot it even when critics tried to dismiss it as pious muck that taught dangerous lessons. If you enjoyed discovering these hidden facts about the Cowboys, do us a favor and hit that like button, drop a comment telling us your favorite moment from the film, and subscribe to the channel because we've got plenty more classic Western content coming your way. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.